I have to say, Tim, I'm a little bit nervous about this.
Oh, why?
Well, I'm sure I've told you this before, but for the benefit of people listening, this is like the first episode of this podcast in a couple of months that I've got like a real run of people who I didn't do before that I really wanted to speak to. Like it was
Yeah.
stupid that I didn't. It was stupid that there wasn't an Ash episode. Basically,
Oh,
I brought it back just for you, but there
oh,
were
thank you.
there were some other people I really wanted to speak to, and there were people kind of like, oh, you should do the podcast. I miss it and stuff. I just sort of
Yeah.
got a bit burnt out with it. You know what it's like. Actually, you don't know what it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
because Ash just keep going and going and going. But
Yeah, we are relentless, but yeah. But I
but,
know. Well, welcome back. Yeah, thanks for thanks for
but
resurrecting it for my
yeah,
benefit too. I'm
yeah.
glad.
So
Glad. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, that was one reason why I was nervous, but also when we had that curry. This is going to sound like
Yeah.
James and his pop star mates. But when I had that curry with you and We Are Scientists, which I think was like the first time I'd ever met you outside of like a
Yeah.
like a Virgin Megastore signing when I was a teenager or something. Um, I was texting lads that I was in a band with when I was like 14 because we used to do or 14, 15. We used to do kung fu.
Yeah.
So
Brilliant.
under the table, I was texting them being like, "You're never gonna fucking guess who I'm having a curry with." And I haven't told them that I'm doing this or anything, but
Yeah.
it is that thing of like, I don't know, man. I mean, I was an Ash nut. I mean, I know I want
Yeah.
alone. There were some Ash nuts, but it was weird being like there's an episode coming up with Stephen from Biss, and
Yeah.
I was. I was thinking to myself, like when I was putting together the run of episodes that are coming for the next couple of weeks, I was like, I really need to get some youth on the podcast. And in my head, Biss and Ash are like my age, right? And
Yeah.
I'm 16, but we're not
Yeah.
that anymore.
Yeah. Let's just pretend we are. Yeah.
Do you feel? I mean, do you feel your age?
Oh, yeah, like moments for sure. There's I got a 1.5-year-old kid now, and
Yeah,
I think that is sort of get entering the parent world. That really has made me sometimes think, oh, okay. And but I guess when I'm on tour, yeah, it's easy to kind of forget, or when I'm playing, it's sort of it's straight back to those moments. But that stuff is like a long time ago. Like when we started 31 years ago, and that is like
yeah.
that's it would have seemed really ancient to the young Tim who started the band, but by now. But yeah, no, there's definitely moments I do think, oh yeah, and as I creep closer to 50, like that's a big. I think that's a kind of age that creeps up, and you're like, oh yeah, I have to start thinking about dying now and stuff. So yeah, so
Che-
yeah, yeah, I need to
cheer,
start preparing.
cheery.
Yeah, sure, yeah, or I need to, it's like okay, what maybe I'll have like 20 more years of being able to do like a lot of stuff. Maybe then I should retire or what. I don't know. It's things like that. Sometimes it hits me, but most of the time I get, I can nicely forget about it.
I guess a bit more what I meant though is that I feel a little bit like with like Kaniki aren't a thing anymore, but like with
Yeah.
Biss and Ash, and there's probably a couple of other examples, but particularly like Biss and Ash that are like bands that I loved as a teenager who were my age, and that was important to me. That it was like
Yeah.
I was watching people my age, so it was like, oh, it was quite punk to me. It was like this is accessible. This isn't like grown ups. This is like I can do this. Not to go off and be in, a brilliant pop punk band, but like I can I can be in music. And it was because there
Yeah.
was people my age that were doing it. And I just wonder a bit like if you ever feel like people still see Ash as like a band of 16-year-olds because
Yeah.
I sort of still do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a bit of that, I suppose that was one of the most interesting things about us was that we were so young. Um, and
Genuine real
then,
teenagers as the Sleep said.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And, yeah. And then the other thing that was, yeah, sometimes it's been hard to escape. And also the fact we were always talking about how much we were drinking and, like it seemed like maybe we didn't take things very seriously, which was kind of fun too. But, I guess now, maybe people have accepted us, we sort of kept going long enough that it isn't the defining feature quite anymore. But yeah, it's. I mean, there was like quite a scene as well. It was quite cool. You know, there was like Supergrass, or you know, you mentioned Kaneki and Biss. There
Yeah,
was like
yeah.
there's a bunch of there was like a cool teenage thing going on at that moment, and
But
it was nice that
at least
yeah
Supergrass have the dignity to grow beards.
yeah
I mean,
yeah
Rick went with a beard, didn't he? But you know,
yeah
you
yeah.
could
Rick has a massive beard. Yeah,
you
I can
could
do a good bit.
you could still
Yeah,
get
but
ID'd.
yeah, I don't know. The trouble is, if I do grow a beard, there's so much of it is grey. Like somehow, like this bit hasn't fully gone grey yet. But my old chin is really grey. I look like kind of like a badger if I grow my beard. So that's why I don't. I remember once doing going for a Japanese like a photo shoot for a Japanese record label, and you know it's for like a Japanese magazine, and I had a bit of stubble, and Akiko from our record label, like she just begged me until I shaved because the Japanese fans wanted me to look really young and fresh faced, and I was maybe only like 27, 28 at that time. But even yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I think people still want us to look young
Does it
if
feel a bit?
possible.
Does it feel a bit? Does it feel a little bit like kind of back? I mean, because the last record came out, Fist Panda.
Yeah.
That feels very like, not that you were on Fist Panda in 1997, but it feels fitting of that time.
Oh yeah. Well, we were on the second Fierce Panda single called Crazed and Confused with and it was only teenage bands. It was us, Credit to the Nation, Supergrass, Gorky's, I think Noise Addict. I think there's one other Tribute to Nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's funny it ties in with that as well. But yes, it's really cool being back on like being on Fierce Panda and doing like a full album now, and you know it's kind of amazing we've all survived, especially when you read Simon's book. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to say
Yeah.
that. I did an episode with him for the podcast a while
Brilliant.
ago,
Yeah.
and it was the two of us kind of talking about our own experiences with mental illness. But
Yeah.
it was kind of mind blowing to me actually, because it was
Yeah.
like I kept trying to sort of drill. This is gonna sound a bit gross. I don't mean it in a gross way, but I was like, because he
Yeah.
laid it out in the book, I was trying
Yeah.
to I was trying to I was trying to get to what it really was that had troubled him so much, and really it was like the music industry changing beyond recognition, and
Yeah.
that kind of really sort of weirded me out, really, because I was like, well, I get really upset about that a lot, and I get quite troubled about where this is all
Yeah.
going, but I also, that wouldn't be the sort of the motivating factor in like great sadness in me, do you know? But
Yeah.
The fact that Simon was like, it's really hard to put out records now, and that caused him such distress. But I suppose that kind of
Yeah.
ties into identity and things like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And it's great how he's survived and stuck at it, and then he's come. You know, I think he's in a good place with like good backing now, and it's
Yeah,
been it's I think it's worth sticking around for. You know, sometimes you can if you hang in there, it will get better. Sometimes you don't think it will, but actually, you know, it's nice when it does. But yeah, so I guess he's been through so many kickings, or you know, been so close to so many massive things. You know, almost signing Coldplay or Keen, or you know, so many, and yeah, and then just seeing how yeah, and all those dalliances with different record, you know, major labels that he did. Yeah, it must have ground him down. But yeah, anyway, it's. I think like releasing the book has been a good outlet for him, and sort of you know that's I think that's helped a lot. And you know, I guess he's you know it's nice. It's great reading his writing again as well because
I
you know
mean,
we first knew him as an amazing journalist as well.
yeah. I mean, no one puns like that guy.
Yeah. Sometimes
But
in the tour, but you know, the tour van, we think we're doing quite well at punning, but then I was like, I'm really reminded when I was
yeah,
reading him and hanging with him again recently. Yeah.
I do this other podcast called Brainworms, which is about like the madness of the internet, and every episode title, like, you know, whoever I've got on, I've had some, you know, quite amazing guests on it, but whoever I have on, I don't really like putting the episode title like, or this episode with
Yeah.
whoever, like I do a pun, and there have been times where I've been because it's not a skill that comes naturally to me.
Yeah.
I'll have to text you when you're in the tour van. But there have been
Yeah.
times where I've been like, what would Simon Williams do?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Rick in our band is really good with them as well. So yeah, if you're stuck, he's great as well.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
There's quite often I quite often go back to, even though it's not a music podcast, I quite often go to song titles. Like the other day,
Yeah.
I interviewed this amazing woman called Ali Miller, who'd been in the Jehovah's Witnesses and left and wrote a book about it, and I was like, oh, and I was like, oh, I've been listening to a lot of Dylan recently, so I was like, oh, it's obviously All Along the Watchtower because that's the magazine that the Jehovah's Witnesses sell. And
Brilliant.
I was like, still got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's
I
awesome.
guess kind of tie in a bit what I was talking about there is, for people our age who, I mean, the late 90s was comes in for a bit of kicking, kind of like with a bit of sort of cultural revisionism in my mind, and there are things about that era that I don't think scan very well in the kind of modern age. But in terms of like an indie rock culture, I think it was kind of amazing. Like, it's so weird to me. I was thinking about that song. There's a song. This is Fake DIY by Biss, and it's like a song which is like, I mean, I love that song, but it's a song which is it's a song in a way which is like completely irrelevant because it's talking about like individual record formats and all of these things that just don't exist anymore. It's mad.
Yeah.
But I also feel like, I don't know, like it was such a interesting time as a music fan and as a musician and as a music journalist because there was just so many labels, like venues were kind of in better health, but also just you had a Peel, you had an evening session. There was just a total infrastructure around it. Has that been difficult to see? Has that been difficult for you or a band like Ash to see that fall away?
Oh yeah. I get very nostalgic about it. Actually, I've got a new song on the new Ash album called Usual Places, and it's kind of it's sort of, I was sort of thinking actually about whenever I first moved to New York and all places I used to go out and hang out, people to hang out with. It's like 15 years later when I was leaving, like so many of those places like closed or gone, or and people had gone, and that was only like those 15 years. But then if I think back to the 90s and just there's a lot of it, that whole scene or industry, and even like the music press, much maligned, but also like where would we have been without them? And and this, I don't know, just like, I don't know, things like going to America, all like the great comic shops and record stores that you had then. It was like such cultural hubs. I guess we do have versions of those now, thankfully.
I'm not totally sure that we do though. That's the thing. It's like,
yeah,
I don't want to be like an old fart about this. By the way, I'm really trying not I'm really trying not to swear because my mum listens to like every podcast I make, and she keeps telling me off saying I'm swearing too much. And I don't know what that's about. There's a bit. So if I swear, then feel free to reprimand me. You can swear though. That's fine.
We'll get a swear box.
Yeah. That can fund the next record. No, I guess I don't want to sound like an old dude. I almost swore then. I don't want to sound like an old dude, but because I think kids love music like we love music, but I do just wonder whether, I don't know, you sort of think about the passing of time and progress, right? We make great progress in lots of ways, but I do feel like that setup where Peel would play new stuff, like the evening session would play stuff that was maybe was new but was a bit more mainstream. Like the music press would review so many records that, even just something like going to a show, like I never see coloured vinyl anymore. These things mattered to me. This stuff mattered to me. And I just wonder what replaced that, because I don't think it's TikTok.
Yeah, I think it's also hard for like acts to develop and sustain it. I think there was more, people were given a bit more time, or, it wasn't so, to be a musician, you could maybe be on the dole and do it, and you didn't have to have work another job, or, so much where you had to, you had a bit of bit more of a chance to develop and wouldn't have to quit. So, I kind of feel for new bands. We're lucky we've got a fan base and that's like sustained us. But I think it just must be very hard. And, and part of that was like, there was like record labels would support bands for a couple albums, maybe, indie labels. I know there was a lot of this major labels, you kind of get signed and
Yeah.
you might sound a big deal, but maybe your album would never come out and you'd be waiting 3 years and then you just have to give up at that point. But I don't know. There was good and bad things about the scene, but yeah, I think it helps a lot of things develop, and it was good for creativity in a lot of ways. And even like MTV, like all those brilliant directors that got to like develop, I don't know, there's so many like works of art were made at that time. There was like,
I
guess there was money in the industry. Yeah.
I talk about this on the podcast all the time, but like when I was in the latter days of me being at Kerrang, we used to do a lot of like reader research, and like kids would come in, and the idea was that you were trying to understand their music fan habits, like how they consume music, and they all said, like it was like looking into a vortex and seeing yourself as a teenager, because you were almost like expecting them to say, oh, record shops, what are they? It's like, that's like Stonehenge, it's something from the past. But they weren't like that at all. They were like, oh, we love record shops, but there's just not really anywhere to go, and we don't have any money because, they don't have Saturday jobs anymore. That's like just a whole way of teenagers making money that just doesn't exist anymore. And they're like, and I was telling them about Peel, and they were like, what? There was like an old man who used to like play records at the wrong speed and you tuned in for that. And I was like, yeah, it was amazing. But they were really excited by that. It's like, that's the thing that sort of makes me sad, is I don't think teenagers changed. It's just the industry changed.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, I guess there just was, just when the money dropped out of the industry with, like streaming income has nowhere near replaced what CDs or, vinyl has had a resurgence, but that's kind of limited as well. You're going to sell a few thousand. It's not like selling hundreds of thousands. So yeah, I think that's, I think just the economics has just dragged a lot of it out of it. A lot of the.
I always think that vinyl revival is a little bit overstated as well, because when you actually look at the charts, it's like, who is still buying Dark Side of the Moon? It's like, it's never like, I don't know, it's never like a new band. It's always like Adele and Dark Side of the Moon and Definitely Maybe. And so it's like, I think it's a bit of a misnomer, really. But I do think apart from the fact that Ash consistently still write bangers, I do think one of the things that is really impressive about Ash is that you have always managed to like maintain relevance. Like for a band that has existed that long, and I'm sure a lot of it is because people like me who were there at the beginning kind of grew up with you, but you've always kind of managed to like find kind of interesting ways to stay relevant. And I even think that about the aesthetic of, the record sleeves and, but just even kind of doing the A to Z stuff, it was like, oh, here's a twist, here's a different way of releasing music. Do you put a lot of thought into that?
Oh yeah, very much. Well, first and foremost, though, I always think, okay, we've got to have good songs, and that's like, I spend ages just writing. I write tons and tons, and Mark and Rick then help me like filter out the stuff. But we don't rush things so much anymore. We sort of make sure we've got like a good body of songs. I think we always like, with 1977, we had a great batch of tunes, and then like Free All Angels, I think like we sort of think, okay, we need to have a certain quality of songwriting with everything we put out, to sort of live up to that, because we feel like our fans expect that, or we sort of feel like if we don't have the right songs, we're going to sink, really. And and then we've always liked having like kind of crazy ideas like the A to Z series, let's put out 26 singles in a year, or we always like try to find twists and make it interesting. And our manager Tav, he was always great for bonkers ideas. Like he was the one who was like, okay, you've got the A to Z series, why don't we do an alphabetical UK tour? And it's like he had a background of like, he used to work for the KLF, and they always had the most bonkers ideas. So I think he's always got looking for something kind of interesting.
Yeah,
So yeah, we do. Yeah, I think we always just try to measure ourselves against what we did and early on, and try to live up to that. So I think that's why I know we've got to try to keep our quality high.
yeah. I mean, the KLF burned £1,000,000.
Yeah.
How much money do you think you could burn and not feel bad about it?
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, that was a big thing. Yeah, the guilt of what could you have spent that money on?
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of songs, I'm bonkers on that song "Rewarding Mind." You know,
Oh, awesome! Thanks.
do you, do you
Yeah.
feel a little bit like you might be morphing into Weezer now?
Oh, right.
I mean,
Well, that's
that song's
yeah,
very Weezer.
yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, I think like we toured with Weezer on the Pinkerton tour in '96, and like I do remember like actually before that, like flashback to '95, we were about to release Kung Fu, and Tab, our manager, got in touch and said, "Oh, I've just heard the songs on the evening session. It sounds really like Kung Fu. I'm kind of," and because it was Buddy Holly by Weezer, and it had the just like, and we had in ours,
Yeah,
and he was like, he's kind of a bit nervous, like oh, it's similar, but I was like, I listened, I was like, well, it's the same kind of thing, but not really. So we're gonna be all right. So I loved them straight away as soon as I heard that. I was like very curious to hear, and then I remember vividly the first time here in Pinkerton was we were playing in Japan in this venue in Nagoya which is in a shopping mall. It's like maybe on the fourth floor of this shopping mall, Club Quattro. And I think I went downstairs to like a Tower Record or something and heard this record playing. I was like, wow, this sounds so cool. It's kind of garagey and rocky, but there's cool, great guitar sounds, great guitar playing, and like kind of poppy melodies. I was like, what the hell is this? And I was like, whoa, it's like this is the new Weezer. And it was like way, totally unpolished. Like the Blue album was so polished, and this is I loved the kind of the edge of it, and the drum sound. I'd never heard like such cool sounding drums at that point. It was a little, maybe like a little bit on Surfer Rosa by
yeah.
Pixies. That kind of, it was maybe like, wow, these drums are wild. And so I bought it straight away, and I remember playing it to everyone. And then like a few days later, they got in touch and asked us if we'd tour with them in the States. And so yeah, and they were just absolutely brilliant. And they didn't. They were kind of they stripped it down a bit. Yeah, I think the year before or 2 years before they'd been touring arenas with No Doubt, but now they were going out with this album that wasn't really connecting with the pop public they had before, and they were doing smaller venues, and we didn't have a lighting engineer, so Mark was doing their lights every night, but they were just so brilliant. So anyway, I really fell in love with Weezer, and that's kind of why I wanted a second guitarist in the band when we got Charlotte to join.
Yeah,
So yeah, I don't
always
mind if
thought
you've
that.
morphed.
Well,
Yeah,
because there's that
yeah,
footage of you doing Only in Dreams, isn't there? And like,
yeah.
and Rick's nose is running.
I'll have to check that. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I think he makes a point of it. I'm pretty sure I can't even remember what that's on, but
Wow.
there's
Yeah.
there's some Ash. I can't remember. We used to watch it all the
Wow.
time
Yeah.
when we were students, and
Oh, it
like
could have been. We did a DVD and live in Tokyo. It was called Tokyo Blitz. Maybe
that's
that
the
was it.
one. And I think
Yeah, and I remember that was a tour we were playing Only in Dreams. It's because when we toured with Weezer, they didn't play Only in Dreams on the Pinkerton tour, and I was like, "You should be playing that. It's one of your best songs." And I got Rivers to show me the chords, and then when they weren't playing it, we were like, "Okay, we'll bring this back." Yeah, yeah. Eventually, I think they rediscovered it.
I have to say so Weezer. I did a Weezer cover story for Kerrang. Like it was like the last thing before I left, and they were lovely, but they were the weirdest people I've ever met.
They
Like
are very, yeah.
genuinely, like how the fuck? I've just
Yeah.
swore. I've just swore. Sorry, mum. I
Can't
was
you
like,
edit this out?
no, no.
Here's time for that.
I'm authentic, Tim. I'm punk rock.
Yeah.
I was like, how have you people ever met? Like, how did you? Like, I can understand in a band. Like, there was someone when I was at university. He was a bit older than me, and he got me into the Pixies. And I remember him being like, the thing that's amazing about the Pixies is that you look at those four people, and you're like, how on earth did you ever meet, right?
Yeah.
And I know bands where it's like, like the Who, for example, right, where you're like, oh, Keith Moon was a lunatic, but like, Daltrey's
Yeah.
fairly, a regular dude or whatever. But with Weezer, I was like, you four people are so weird. How did you ever meet each other? Like, there was this thing where I was talking to Rivers about, he was really active on Twitter at the time. I was like, oh, you're making a lot of Twitter. And he told me that sometimes on an evening, he'll just think of sentences that make him laugh. And he'll like set up a bot that will like tweet those sentences for the next kind of 6 weeks. And I was like, this is so weird, man. But geniuses.
Yeah, he's very, very melodically brilliant, and sometimes his lyrics are just so great. Yeah, and sometimes it can be, not so great. But but like
Beverly Hills, but even that's genius in its own way.
Well, that's one I like a lot. Yeah. There's what's it, and the greatest man who ever lived. That one that I know is probably the irony in it is like strong, and maybe that's what's meant to be great about it. But I'm like, I struggle with that one. But
it was weird with them as well. I know I'm talking a lot about Weezer, and this is talking.
That's fine with me. Yeah, yeah.
The thing that was weird as well was that he was really like insecure. Like, it was really like, I was interviewing them for Kerrang, so big UK rock magazine, and they were doing big dates, and we were at a fancy photo studio in LA, but he was really like talking a lot about how they could have been bigger. And I just thought that was I thought that was so weird. I was like, and I have had that with other musicians before. I remember talking to a member of Newfound Glory once, and him talking about how their career had gone wrong after the big kind of single at the start of their career. And I was like, but you're headlining the Roundhouse tonight. Do you know what I mean? It's it's a pretty good deal, so. It's just weird, but
I guess when you get your expectations, once you hit certain heights, it's hard for you to let go of those, and but like Rivers is you just anytime I've met him, I just don't know which kind of version of him I'm gonna see. And then sometimes he on that tour, he at one point they weren't getting on at all, so much that he asked to like come stay on our tour bus for a night, I remember. So he came on our bus, and I was like, okay, I think we were really great friends. And then like maybe didn't see him for a few years, but next time I saw him, I was all expecting hey, how you doing? And then he just kind of, he wouldn't even like look up from his laptop in the dressing room, and so then and then I think the next time I saw him, he was pretty friendly. I was like, I just don't really know.
I mean, it's part of the brilliance and the horror of the music industry is that, this is a bit more about me really, but like, with my OCD, which I've been very transparent about, it's caused me like real problems. And sometimes I have to sort of question whether it's like my OCD that sort of makes my existence in the music industry difficult sometimes, or whether it's just the fact that it's full of crazy people. Like, I've always wondered if, like, say, if I was like into brewing, right? If I worked at like a brewery, would you meet so many lunatics, or is it just because it's music? Yeah,
I think it was like a magnet for the music industry, and it probably was a great place for lunatics to come and work. He wants, it was a nice haven for anyone who didn't want a kind of regular life, and there was tons of jobs across the whole whole industry. But it probably there was going to be a high percentage of nut jobs, and also there was like so many drugs in it, so much drugs, and psychosis in 90s, 2000s, I think.
Well, I was going to ask that because you guys like went for it at one point. I mean, it definitely felt like Mark went for it. There was just a lot of stories, about him kind of living on the edge. And I'll always remember there was this drugs issue of the Melody Maker in the, I think it was late 90s, early noughties, probably early noughties, because it was Charlotte, and there was like Charlotte was talking about drugs, right? And they were quite heavy drugs, and I remember just being like really shocked, because I was like, I mean, I'm not. I'm 43. I've taken drugs, right? But I'm not. I'm not actually that into drugs. I sort of don't. Maybe it's my complicated brain, but it's a bit like I don't need them, right? But like, Do you ever feel like you went a bit too hard, or do you not regret? Did you just, when you look back, do you think, oh well, that was fun?
Yeah, no, I think yeah, I think we had a lot going on. Like the time I was sort of experimenting most with drugs was kind of early on when we were like making the first album, and having our kind of getting to like almost our biggest, most popular point as well. So it's kind of dealing with the end of being a teenager, fame and sort of success for the first time, and major pressure as well to sort of keep delivering, and also exhausting schedules, and then throwing like trying drugs for the first all that stuff for the first time. Yeah, it was definitely, just like it was really burning the candle at both ends, and just I think I was really kind of burnt out when we were like number one in the charts, and I should have been happiest, and I was kind of having a bit like a nervous breakdown at the time, and that was so I think and that was when I sort of like, oh, it's like this isn't really for me, sort of I sort of, I guess, yeah, I kind of tried lots of things and then realized, oh, I don't really kind of need it. But so yeah, but I guess there was always a lot of drinking around us. But we luckily, I think it was very lucky that none of us like really like cocaine around it, because that was just flying around like a blizzard, all surrounding us. But we could have kind of gone quite wrong with that, I reckon.
Yeah, it's
quite spent all our money. Yeah,
it's quite sad actually. There's people I used to knock about with in my NME days when I mean, I think it was maybe the tail end of that you were talking about. Really, I don't know how prevalent it would be now, but I sometimes cross paths with people from those days. Not deliberately, really, but like just when you're out and about and you'll see someone and it's like they haven't stopped, and it's like it's hard, I
think it's maybe a bit of our longevity is like, I don't know, we sort of caught on quite early on, but Mark, he was really experimenting as a teenager, but to the point where he had a kind of breakdown when we were like 17, 18 maybe. We were like being flown to LA for our first meeting record labels. I think it was Interscope and Reprise Records flew us over, and we were like, but Mark couldn't come because he walked out of school and checked himself into hospital because he was having a breakdown, and and sort of he was sort of dealing with a lot of kind of mental health stuff the first few years of the first years of success that we had. So he couldn't do drugs. He could maybe that's why he drank like such a maniac, I think. But
it's sad. Man. I was talking quite a lot to Richard from 60 Foot Dolls at one point. Because I loved that first record. Was like one of my favorite records ever made.
So good live. Yeah, they were like terrifying to play after, because they were like the Who, like you were mentioning the Who, but they would just like destroy their instruments on stage. They were like incendiary, and then we'd be coming on after them. We'd have to like have to be really fired up to follow those guys.
Yeah, they were really that watching them at that time, which I saw them all the time, and like listening to that record. Like
great songs as well. Yeah, Hair and all. It's brilliant. Yeah.
Well, this is what I was going to say, and I was talking to Richard, and he was talking a bit about how chaotic it all was. Drinking drugs, and
is that insane?
And is that thing of like, I always feel like the world was cheated, really, because that band should have made more records, and I'm sure there was other pressures of the music industry, but I just wonder whether they kind of burnt out, and whether that was a bit because they went at it so hard. But they were just so good. Like they should have been so much bigger.
Yeah, I think that, like, it's a double-edged sword, because I think they got a lot of press from being so crazy. But but then it's a bit like us as well. I think it was almost encouraged, because it made for interesting magazines and articles and crazy pictures and stuff. But
it's weird.
It's kind of almost expected. Expected of you. Yeah,
it's weird.
I remember Richard seemed a bit. He was a bit annoyed sometimes. He'd get annoyed that Carl and Mike were like so insane. Sometimes he was like, "Oh, couldn't we just do music and be?" Anyway, sorry.
No, he's a little bit older though, isn't he? He's a little bit older than the other two, so I think there was a bit of that. Like, but it is. It was weird though. Like I remember as a fan, like before I was writing for anyone, and like, because I was in a trailer, right, and I
Yeah.
loved. I've always been more of like a kind of indie rock guy than like than
Yeah.
like a metal rock guy. You know, I like I like my rock music to be a bit fey in a way. You know, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I just thought trailer was like. I mean, you know, my favorite song was Uncle Pat, right? So that's like
Oh
quite
yeah. Yeah.
you're singing really sweetly and stuff on it. And then there
Yeah.
was this, and then, you know, 1977 comes out, and you know that's obviously a classic debut, you know, debut proper. And then there was this period kind of after that where it seemed like you definitely embraced more of the kind of rock god
Yeah.
kind of vibe. Like,
Yeah.
I felt
Yeah.
like, you know, you were playing the flying V more often, like you were wearing leather.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
was that how you remember it? It almost felt like you'd been corrupted in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Yeah. I think. Yeah. I guess it was. I think it was all that kind of stuff I was talking about. You know, we were like, we were kind of young and fresh faced and innocent to begin with, but those are like some pretty heavy years we kind of went through, and um, but yeah, I guess we were like trying to think like how could we mature and develop this, and I guess we were sort of drawn to a bit more a darker side of things, with there was some whenever 1977 came out, there was a bit. Sometimes we'd be in all these like teenage magazines, or we'd go to Germany or Australia, and in the CDs they would have a individual like photos of a band as if we were like a boy band or something, and there was like
Yeah.
there was sort of this kind of a pop star thing, like one would be on the cover of Smash Hits instead of Kerrang or NME or Melody Maker. When we sort of started getting into that pop kind of side of things, I think that kind of freaked us out a bit, and we didn't want that to be the direction. So I think purposefully we were like, okay, we're steering in the other direction, and maybe lost a little bit of the pop, the pop side of thing on Nuclear Sounds, which I think we sort of thought whatever we do anyway, our fans will come with us, but it wasn't necessarily true. So I think we'd kind of discovered that it's a fickle kind of world, and people maybe would have liked us to have made another record the same. So, but yeah, anyway, I think that was what happened. We were sort of
Yeah.
reacting. I think we were putting the brakes on in our own kind of way, and like, I don't know, trying to slow things down a bit, and trying to evolve.
I love that song. I love that song Oslo.
Oh, thanks.
I don't know who Demira is.
Demira, yeah, she's a Dutch girl I met in New York, and I had sort of like I had a sort of circle of friends who were like songwriters, and we would get together and sort of everyone we'd have a songwriting day. Everyone sort of writes their songs and gets together at the end of an evening and plays back what we'd done that day. And so yeah, like she was someone who came in through a friend, and I was like, wow, what a great voice. Whenever I wrote Oslo, Mark from Ash was like, oh, we should do this as a duet, and I was like, oh, I know she's great. So yeah, I hope more people discover her.
Yeah, I kind of want to hear. I kind of want to hear more of that from you, though. If I'm just putting in a request now,
Yeah,
a fan
yeah.
request. I
More
just
duets. Yeah,
well, it's a certain kind of duet though as well. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
It's not Disney.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
just. I
yeah.
just think that it was really. I just thought it was a really
It's
interesting
nice. Oh,
texture on
brilliant.
the record. You know.
Yeah, yeah. That's how it's nice to sort of still be coming up with fresh angles, in the band. That's I love songs like that you have on an album. It's like, oh, this is kind of new for us. It's good to be discovering that, after all these years.
Well, I think it's my favorite band are the Ramones, right? And
Yeah,
I balk at the criticism of the Ramones that they always did the same thing. I think that's nonsense. But there is a lot where they sort of followed a template, and it
yeah,
is interesting whenever I hear an Ash record where I'm like, surely they've used up all the melodies now,
yeah,
and when I started the record and like with the title track, I was like, no, they're still. Tim's still
yeah,
finding other ways to present
yeah.
what he's doing here. I mean, does it still come easy to you, or do you have to
Yeah.
wrestle it out?
I just have to work hard at it. Just have to, it's kind of like writing a song for me is easy. Like melodies, that they come to me really quite quickly, and lyrically, I always it takes me more time. Like I labor a lot over that, but sort of it just takes. I just know to sort of write one great song. I have to write 10 or 20 songs, or and they come out. They'll sort of be amongst it, but you can't sort of sit down and plan it. But the only thing you can do is do it a lot. So, yeah, and I'm always like trying to find like a fresh angle on it as well. So it's nice. Sometimes it's nice when things repeat a little bit of something you've done before, but there's a fresh take on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, speaking of repeating, was the Like a God reprise because you just wanted to noodle out some more?
Yeah, it was actually that was a bit of a struggle, because whenever we wrote the song, we just started doing that riff as really slowly and built it up again, and the whole song actually originally was 8 minutes long. It was that that bit came straight out of the end of it, and but then we were like, we knew we wanted Like a God to be kind of early in the album. It's still strong, but we didn't think people could stomach a 8-minute song as track 3 or track 4. So yeah. That's why we split it up. But like Mark, it was really hard convincing Mark to do, to put that bit at the end. But yeah, so yeah.
Oh, what Mark was resistant of it.
He wanted the full 8-minute track to be like, not to be separated, like he wanted it to be full, not to be cut in half like it was. But yeah, it was a fight. But yeah, anyway, I think it was a good compromise, because it still comes out of the track before over and out quite nicely.
Yeah, not to speak ill of Mark, he's not here, so he can't defend himself. But I think I think you probably got it right. Actually, I was like, when it came back in, and I was like, oh, this is
there's something fun about hearing when it coming back. It's like, okay, this is it's nice, yeah. And the guy Claudius, who mixes our records and he mixes We Are Scientists as well, he was like kind of adamant, and there's not many things he sort of says like, you shouldn't do or should do this, but he was like, you gotta put that bit at the end. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
When he speaks like that, I'm like, okay, we gotta listen.
Yeah, you sometimes need that person to referee, don't you? You run about 1977 before. Have you watched it? How much Star Wars do you watch, or is the fact that you're approaching 50 now, was that the moment to get out of it?
I come back to it. Like my girlfriend's daughter, she's 11 and a half now, but during lockdown, I found out she hadn't watched Star Wars, so we went through everything, and and it was cool, and we got really into Mandalorian as well. So it was cool seeing it through fresh eyes, with Romy. That was really cool. But I don't know, like it's a lot of it, new stuff's hit or miss with me, but Mandalorian I thought was fantastic. Mark watches absolutely everything though, of course.
Oh, still.
Yeah, Mark is like really hardcore.
I've definitely, I mean, Kat, my wife, isn't really bothered at all. Like, so there's a bit of like the last 2 series I haven't watched, and there's a bit of I don't know. It's really weird. You ever have that thing when you're into something and you just presume everyone else would be into it? Like, I'll always remember like girlfriends I used to take to like the cinema, and you'd go watch like a horror movie, and I'd be like, well, horror is my favorite thing, so. And then, like, you look at them and you'd be like, "I've made a real mistake here." Like, And so
it's like whenever I took Emmy the Great to an Iron Maiden gig, and I was and we left like, and Iron Maiden had been like my favorite band when I was like 8 or 9 or so, 9 or 10, and but I was like, oh, this is
Vietnam, man, Vietnam.
Yeah, Vietnam, exactly those days. But I was like, Emmy's not good. This isn't for her. So I think we left after a few songs, but I was like. Yeah. So I think exactly like that. It's not the right thing.
Isn't she? I read somewhere that she was not doing music anymore.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think she's writing a lot at the minute. I think she did a final gig though as well. So yeah, I don't know. We've been meaning to catch up, but
she's
so talented. Yeah.
I don't know her very well at all, but there was a few kind of house parties in the noughties where sometimes we would cross paths, and I always really
Yeah,
enjoyed her music. So I saw this thing on
yeah,
Twitter that she wasn't making music anymore, and I just felt really sad about it because I thought
yeah.
she was really talented.
Hopefully, I think she'll always be writing a lot, but hopefully that's like an Elton John quitting, and she'll be back before long.
Well, you said at one point you weren't going to make records and you weren't going to make albums anymore, and then
Yeah,
here
yeah.
we are.
But
You
it was
know,
only albums. Yeah, yeah, exactly. We did we well we gave the singles quite a good go with the HZ series, but then we were like, oh yeah, I sort of I remember like when it sort of coincided with vinyl coming back, and I started listening to the full albums again. So I was like, oh, we should go back on our word here.
yeah.
And if we're going to go back, it better be a good record, because
Records are
otherwise we're going to get such a kick.
records are
Yeah.
records are class, man. You know, I mean,
No.
I do
Yeah.
think Ash is sort of a quintessential singles band, but albums are amazing. You know, so
Yeah.
long.
I like writing to an album. I like the form, thinking, okay, it's like a story beginning, middle, and ends, and especially when you got vinyl, you got split it sides. You split halfway through, so
Yeah,
you're thinking what track's going to be the end of side one and what's the start of side two. That it's a nice way to work, because you think, okay, I've got to get this many songs that high standard. One other thing is, I'm also like a child of the cassette era, and albums. Yeah, it had to be good, because it was you listened to get back to the beginning of side one where your good tracks are. You're gonna have to go through all of side two, and side two it better be good, unless you want to use your rewind button a lot.
yeah. When I've written this book recently, and there's a lot about revisiting like teenage years, and I was feeling very wistful about my Walkman. It's been a long
Yeah,
time. I presume I still have it somewhere, but it was this like Panasonic, this red Panasonic thing that was like, I mean, it was like a
yeah,
brick, but I mean, no one ever loved anything more than I loved that Walkman. And
yeah,
there is part of me that's like, I think I mean, I've been threatening to do this for a long time, but there is part of me that's like, maybe I'm finally going to sort out the clutter
yeah,
in my office to see if I can find it, you know, so
yeah. That'd be fun. Yeah, yeah. It was like,
amazing.
I remember like having Walkman stuff where like the front had come off it, and you could still get the cassette in there and just keep it working,
Well,
and yeah.
there was a kid in my village, right? There was a kid in my village who stole that Walkman. This has just come to me now. This is like somewhere in the sort of neurons of my brain. I remember I was walking to the youth club, and I was meeting my mates there because I was a bit late, and I was walking. I was listening to my Walkman, and I was listening to. I think it was probably. I think it was probably "Girl from Mars," like the single, and
Wow.
and there was a kid. There was a kid that nicked my Walkman, but it was literally like him coming up to me and being like, "Give us your Walkman," and me being like, "No," and him being like, "I'm going to beat you up," and me being like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay then," and I gave it to him because I didn't want to fight, and then I went home and I told my mum and dad, and they rang the police, and they went round to his house because he was a kid from school, and they went round to his house and they got the Walkman, brought it back, but they didn't bring back the cassette.
Oh no.
So
Wow.
there's some proper wrong'un in South
Yeah.
Yorkshire that is that got a copy of Girl from Mars off me. So
Wow, yeah. Well, maybe he became a fan
maybe,
and
maybe.
reformed his life. I don't know.
Well, he
Well, that's
did.
that.
Not long
Yeah.
after that, he did burn down a bit of the school.
Ah, okay.
So maybe
I
that's
can't.
your fault.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's amazing is that the police actually went and had the time to go and do something, and that's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, different.
Nowadays, someone gets a phone still, and yeah, it's just like, okay, whatever.
Well, last time I was home, I got Kat to drive me around the village and go to some places I hadn't been to in 20 years, and the police station was closed. Like
Yeah,
it's not there anymore. So
yeah,
anyway, and
yeah,
we are sounding like old farts moaning about the demise of
yeah,
law and order. Um,
yeah. Well, you brought up cassette singles. I couldn't help going back in time. Yeah,
yeah. Well,
even
listen,
just thinking, wow.
I
Yeah,
should probably wrap up because we've both got we're of an age, we can only go so long.
Yeah.
But I think this has been a good episode back.
Good. Yeah.
Thanks for guiding me through it. What's the plan now? What happens to Ash from this point on?
Well, we're about to go to Europe on tour with the Subways. So we just did a UK tour with them, so that's gonna be a lot of fun. That takes us up to Christmas. And actually, I'm sitting here in the studio at the computer and working on another album. We've got there's sort of a second half to Race the Night that was like that kind of synthy kind of track. So we're kind of like halfway through a very different kind of album. So not too dissimilar to the way We Were Scientists. They had Huffy and then Lobes. But the music is totally different. But so anyway, there may be a fun little companion coming out next year if I can get it done in time.
Race the Day.
Yeah, exactly. Chase is something maybe. Who knows? Send in some suggestions.
I like that, man. I was because obviously my missus works with scientists, and I think it was during the lockdown. I was hearing all those songs, and it's so weird to hear those records now because in my mind they're all it's like one long record because I kind of heard them all at once and stuff. Are you and scientists just like watching Drive all the time? Because there's definitely a bit of a shared aesthetic, isn't there, with the sleeve and I can't remember what the video is for one of their more recent songs, but it's got the same sort of like neon thing. I mean, what's going on there?
They'll probably just tell you we're copying them, but yeah, I think we've spent so much time together. Maybe our minds have morphed into one.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
and what a mind that would be. What a mind.
Yeah. But actually, I think we I was talking about that sort of our song challenge, songwriters group that we have in New York, and we were all writing like those two albums, and these albums were kind of all this kind of songs that we were each bringing into those songwriting kind of nights, and so I think we do share a lot aesthetically, and I don't know. Keith always would ask me engineering tips or things like that for recordings, and
I saw them at first time. The only time this year I think I've seen them. Sometimes when they're active, it's like sort of 5 or 6 times a year. It's almost like once a month. But we went to some little festival that was on like the outskirts of Cambridge, and saw them, and I love that band.
It was brilliant.
Yeah, I was like, when I say this all the time, when I was at NME and they were sort of at the beginning, when they sort of broke through, I was like, eh. And then now I'm like, I was an idiot. Like they were brilliant. You know what I mean? I mean, I've got to say that because they helped pay the mortgage. But Anyway,
they're phenomenal.
Tim, thanks so much for speaking to me, man. It's been a real pleasure.
And welcome back. And thanks for having me.
Thanks, man. Next time you're in London, give me a shout. We'll go do curry again.
Okay, awesome. Will do. Brilliant.
Amazing, man. Speak to you soon.